I'm now going to show you some of the dimension tools that we have available to us. So I'm going to apply some dimensions to this drawing of a piece of steel deck. I'm going to click on the large dimension button on the annotation panel, and there's two ways of applying dimensions. We can either click on the ends of the line that we want to apply the dimension to and then pull up and do a third click to place it. Alternatively, you can just hover over any line and it will put a dimension across the entire line, and then we could just pull down and again do a second click just to place it. You can see that it will maintain this offset, the distance between the actual dimension and the object. So it's really important to just get into the habit of clicking on the outside of your drawing just to maintain that distance so that everything looks nice and neat. For example, if I wanted to put a dimension on here and I clicked inside of this actual drawing, you can see that now I've no longer got that distance and it all looks a little bit messy. There's ways of sorting that out afterwards. You can see that if you click on the dimension, you get some blue nodes. The dimension is its own object, and I'm creating this on its own layer called the dimensions layer. It's worth noting that there's also a def points layer that gets created automatically by AutoCAD at this point. That holds a lot of the mathematics and calculations for dimensions. Don't worry about that layer, just ignore it and just know that it's there, but try not to draw in it because it can corrupt the file. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these blue nodes to actually move where this dimension started. And you can see that if I just click on these nodes, they turn red. And then I can just drag across and then just place them. And that has now maintained this offset distance. The other nodes that I've got available to me are to actually move the dimension. So I can move this out wherever I want to put it. And you can see that I've got one on the actual number, the value of the dimension, so I can actually pull this out and place it further away or nearer or even on the other side, depending on how I want to sort of lay out these dimensions. You can see that on these two that I've actually got the number beside the dimension, and that's because it won't actually fit in to that gap here, and that's because of the way that I set up the dimension style in the manager. If I click open the dimension style manager, go to the fit tab, you can see that this is set to be beside the dimension line. You can change this to either being over the dimension line with a leader or without a leader. I prefer with a leader, but it's completely up to yourself really. Click OK, click close, and you can now see that these have changed. This one will if I move this number out past the actual dimension, that I now get the number with an actual leader. This line here is called a leader to show me what it's referring to. The other tools that we've got available are called linear, aligned and angular. So an aligned angle is just that. If I wanted to put a distance on this diagonal line using the linear tool, you can see that what it actually shows me is the linear distance from this point to this point, which is 85 millimeters. It's not showing me the true length of that diagonal line. For that, I need to use the aligned tool. So if I try it on this one, you can see that if I click on the ends of those two lines, pull out, it's now aligned with the dimension and the object. The dimension, the large dimension button, is dynamic, and you can see that if I use this tool, that if I pull the mouse down I get a linear dimension, and if I pull out to the side I get an aligned. So that's what's useful about using this actual dimension tool here. The third one I want to show you is called angular, and what this does is it allows me to add a dimension that shows the angle, the degrees of two objects. So for example, I could click on this line and this line, pull up, and you can see now that I'm seeing the angle, and then just do a third click to place it. You can see that again it's not left this distance, this offset distance here, so I probably want to just come into here and just change where these nodes sit, just to keep my drawing looking nice and neat. The next two tools I want to show you live on the Annotate tab on the ribbon menu in the Dimensions panel, and they are Continue and Baseline, and these allow you to put in dimensions very quickly. With both of these tools you need to start with a normal dimension, and then I'm going to click on Continue, And what this is going to do is it's going to, every time I click, it's going to add a new dimension starting from the last point of the last leg of the dimension. So you can see that I can click on these 3 points here, press escape to finish, and now all I need to do is just dress these leaders so that they're all readable, like this. So that's a very quick way of adding in dimensions going straight down. The baseline tool is very similar to the continue tool, except this time it will always measure from the first leg of the first dimension. So basically everything measures from 0. Click on baseline and now click on every point that you want to add a dimension for, and this time you'll see that it's actually always measuring from that first position. If you ever find yourself in a scenario where you've got 2 dimension lines crossing, you can actually make this a little clearer by using a neat little tool called break. The way this works is you click on the first dimension line and then the second that is crossing, and it will apply a break into the first one that you clicked on. The distance that it leaves is set in the dimension style in the break size box here.